Hello and welcome into the 24/7 Sports Football Recruiting Podcast. I'm National Recruiting Analyst Cooper Petagna alongside 24/7 Sports Director of Scouting Andrew Ivins and our friend National College Football Reporter Tom Lloyd with the backdrop. Tom's got a big move coming up. You know, we're moving from where, Tom? Fort Wayne, Indiana,
Yeah,
to
and then
Smashville, Tennessee. How we feeling about it, bud?
feeling good, man. Ready to be done with it. Ready to be officially in the office. Looking forward to working with you, brother.
Yeah, we're very excited. I got your desk all ready to go.
Let's
Except
go.
at Paramount, you have to reserve your desk, so you only get it 2 weeks at a time. That's kind of what we do over there. But I have your spot. It's ready to go. Stand up desk goes up and down. Very exciting work environment. So we're fired up to have you.
Not wait.
Great show for today, by the way. If you're joining in, we're going to talk about 2025, the latest on the top uncommitted prospects. That's why we got Tom Lloyd here to dish out some intel. We're also going to talk about those 3 stars that are generating some buzz on the recruiting trail. And then guess what? We're going to take your questions at the end of the show like we do for every show. So make sure to submit those questions now, whether you're on X or the 24/7 Sports YouTube channel. And what a great time for a promo. Like I said, the 24/7 Sports YouTube channel, the Oyster Boys, you can find us every Tuesday, Wednesday, noon Eastern time, 11 o'clock Central. You can also find us on X. Guys, we appreciate you joining the show as always. And without further ado, let's get into it, Tom. I mean, it's been a while, my friend. It's been a long time. Last time you were on here, we kind of bullied you into a crystal ball for David Sanders, the number 1 offensive tackle
Appreciate
in the country, number 2 player overall. Since then, the story arc of David Sanders has kind of been a little bit more interesting to follow than I think last time we talked. We felt pretty confident about Clemson, but he took an OV to Nebraska. He's got OVs on deck to Clemson at the end of this month. Georgia, Tennessee, Alabama, Ohio State, South Carolina. There's a lot more teams involved here. I know your current crystal ball is on Clemson, but what can you tell us about David Sanders and the latest with his recruitment?
I expect him back at Georgia this weekend, so there's that. That's going to be intriguing. Got the scavenger hunt this weekend, and it wouldn't shock me if he makes his way to Athens. So that would be interesting. I think that Georgia's kind of a sleeping giant in that one, and they're just not getting talked about enough, in my opinion. But I still like my crystal ball for Clemson. I wouldn't say that I love it. I talked to a bunch of coaches around this recruitment, and they're saying, keep an eye on Tennessee, and some are saying watch out for Georgia and things like that, and Nebraska getting involved. But the majority of people seem to think that if Clemson's not 1, they're 2, and they're right there in the mix. He loves Dabo Swinney and the entire staff. So I'm not ready to change it by any stretch, but the one that I'm really watching, like if I was forced to make a pick today and I think he was going to decide today, I'd be torn between Clemson and Ohio State. Ohio State visits seem to be a game changer. That would probably be my top 2 right now.
Tell us what you think about this Nebraska visit. I was kind of intrigued by that. I mean, it seems, and it makes a lot of sense, a lot of buzz about Dylan Raiola being the guy there from day one in Lincoln. It would make a lot of sense that you would go invest in the top tackle in the country. Is there any real legitimate buzz that he's actually considering Nebraska?
That visit kind of came up very quickly. It was very stealth, behind the scenes, under the radar, whatever you want to call it. But talked to his mom this morning, Samantha, and she was very clear that Nebraska made a great impression. He was the highest ranked prospect, I believe, to ever step foot on campus. I think they called him, at least that was what Nebraska was telling them. So, and the entire family made their way to Lincoln. So that's intriguing as well. So I don't think this was just a fun visit to Nebraska to go check them out and check a box. I think Nebraska's a real player, and Matt Rule has them at least, in consideration as he moves toward the decision.
Tom, let me ask you this, because I've been thinking about it. Does Nebraska get an official visit if Dylan Raiola wasn't there?
No.
If he had not flipped, is that the Dylan Raiola effect?
I think obviously the fact that you're thinking about it is exactly what I think everybody else is on board with. So he's likely going to be the guy sooner rather than later. And I think that the fact that he's just done a great job of connecting with David Sanders and recruiting him, making him a priority, guys like that people want to play with. So if he has success, they're going to land a lot of guys that we previously hadn't talked about.
Druzer, what's your read on this from just like somebody who's been in the business for a long time? And Tom's in it, he's covering it, he's got the pulse week to week on what's happening with David Sanders. But as we zoom out And a couple of weeks ago, it seemed like Clemson was in a very, very good spot. Not to say that they're not, but this is kind of something, at least for me, I think about when we talk about, yeah, you got to win the traditional recruitment, you got to win the ground game, and then you get a seat at the table. Then after that, it's a completely different ball game in the NIL era. I feel like we're entering that phase of the David Sanders recruitment.
Yeah, that's why it seems like the Tigers have faded a little bit. I don't want to put words in Tom's mouth. My thing with Clemson, the longer this stretches out, I think the less confident or optimistic I would be about him signing up to play for Matt Luke and Dabo Sweeney. Ohio State, that is an interesting one to me, just with what they've been able to do in terms of talent acquisition here, really over the past 4 or 5 months. I think you certainly got to look at them. And then Tom tossed out Tennessee. The Vols have had a ton of success in North Carolina. It seems like every single year, the people that pull the strings there swing for a big time tackle. Last year, they went after a few high school guys. They were super involved with Jordan Seaton. There was some smoke behind the scenes leading up to his decision. He picks Colorado. So what does Tennessee do? I mean, they go get Zalance Hurd in the transfer portal. So I think Tennessee, you said it, just being as an outsider, someone that, can read the tea leaves a little bit. I think you got to watch them. Coop, I don't know if you would agree here, but Georgia, David Sanders doesn't feel like a Georgia offensive lineman. This really isn't something we've seen them kind of target in the trenches. With that being said, he's certainly prototypical. He's got all the traits, monster upside. It just seems like Kirby, Stacy Searles, they've kind of built what they got going on more so with the ass and mass.
He might be the exception of the rule. I mean, we're talking about the number one offensive lineman in the country, top 5 player as well. If there's a guy recently, you look at the schools on deck that maybe are in contention here for David Sanders. All right, is there a player that he kind of comps to from any of these schools? I would probably go back, look at Ohio State. Is it Paris Johnson, right? Top 10 pick of the Arizona Cardinals, more of a tradesy left tackle, and a guy that, by all means, I don't think he was a finished product when he got drafted by the Cardinals, right? So to me, I'm just thinking of a program that maybe is able to kind of convey that message to David Sanders, like, hey, this is the closest thing that we have to you, and we've developed that player as well to be a top 10 draft pick. So we'll see what happens with David Sanders. Let's bring up that beautiful full screen that our graphics department just did a great job on. And take a look at some of the other names here. Zaden Walker out of Georgia, one of the top linebackers in the country, the top linebacker in the country. Babs, Andrew Babalola, Jared Smith, Lincoln Cure, Jamie French, Meadows, Owusu-Boateng, Damian Shanklin, Vernell Brown. So a loaded list of 2025 uncommitted prospects. And let's continue to go down the line. I'm pretty fascinated in this one. Zaden Walker, top 10 player, 5-star for us. I just mentioned number 1 linebacker in the country. He's got a commitment date set for July 5th, which July 4th, if you've been paying attention to college football, that's been the weekend where literally there are a lot of fireworks and a lot of players announcing their commitments. Georgia, Penn State, Miami, South Carolina, they're all getting OVs. What's kind of your pulse on this one?
I think Penn State and Miami are definitely in play, but for me, this one's a 2-team race. I like Georgia and South Carolina. And talking to sources connected with all 4, they seem to have the strongest, optimism at this point. But my gut right now, if I was going to put in a crystal ball pick, it would be on the Gamecocks. I think that they have the most optimism, the most confidence. They've been doing a great job recruiting him for a long time. Strong connections there. I think South Carolina could get this one done. Obviously, we have official visits. You mentioned, May 31st and all the way to June 21st. But things wrap up at South Carolina, and I think the Gamecocks get this one done.
All right, y'all ready for a little breaking news here? This is what we do, and this is what our friend Matt Zenitz does, one of the best inside reporters in all of college football. Tom, Andrew, would you guys mind putting out some tweets of what we're getting ready to talk about? Please link the show as well. Cormani McClain, the former 5-star, the belief and the current expectation per Matt Zenitz is that Cormani McClain will transfer to Florida. We talked about this yesterday on the show about what that would look like. I have to dig in the article. Obviously, I'm not able to do that right now as I'm hosting the show. What I'd be interested is yesterday the buzz was that he would be a potential preferred walk-on take for Florida. So I don't know if that's clarified in the article or not. But yes, Cormani McClain has a landing spot. I talked about it yesterday. If I was Florida, I would have told Cormani McClain, you're not seeing a penny. This is something where you're going to have to earn our trust. You're going to have to earn our keep. And the first sign of any negative trouble, you're on a short leash. You're out of here. That being said, it's a pretty interesting take for Billy Napier in what seems to be a make or break year for Napier in the Gators. And Drew, you and I talked about it. It's not like Florida doesn't have a secondary with a lot of young pieces that we like that have also played as true freshmen. So a very calculated risk with a lot of high upside. But you're also rolling the dice here, in my opinion, potentially throwing a grenade into that room as well. That's kind of the way I see it.
All right, so I'm reading Blake Alderman, Swamp 247, does an excellent job. He says it's believed to be a preferred walk-on. I'm paraphrasing here, but a spot could open with Florida's 85-man roster situation. So that number, so he could be on scholarship. And, my initial takeaway reaction, we touched on it Tuesday in the show. Does he become a distraction? Because I think there's going to be a lot of people talking about Cormani McClain. And, it's as big of a name as DJ Lagway to anyone that's familiar with just an ounce of college football recruiting, especially that Florida fan base. I mean, I remember his initial announcement, which we carried on CBS Sports HQ right before Halloween when he was in high school. Everyone thought he was going to Florida, and then he picked Miami. And now, a year later, he's going to be in Gainesville. So I'm for it as long as, Florida has the right plan in place, limited strikes. But he's certainly a talented individual. And you think about pairing him with Jakeem Jackson. I mean, Florida is going to be set in the secondary. And really, I like what they're doing on the defensive side of the ball, what they've assembled here in recent cycles through the high school ranks. And now they're adding a guy via the transfer portal.
Drew, this is a recruitment and a player and a person that you're pretty familiar with. I know you just gave your take on the football side of things, but does this work out in your opinion?
Man, you put me on the spot here. I mean,
that's a good question. I want to know. I want to know what you genuinely think.
I hope it works out. I think it's going to come down to does Cormani love football? Does he want to be there? It's not going to be easy. Things can't be given to him. So it's going to be a testament to the culture Billy Napier has created there at Florida. I mean, if you want to look at the last high profile 5-star from that same high school that ended up in Gainesville, it was DeMarcus Bowman, who ended up transferring to UCF. And I think he's back in the transfer portal. So, the layup would be to say, no, I don't think it is. But I think if Cormani can buy in and Florida sets him up for success with that new defensive back coach, Will Harris, then I think it can work out. Do I think he's going to play week 1 against Miami? I would probably say no. And I think you would agree with me. I mean, technically he could redshirt again this upcoming season.
Yeah, what I think is interesting is in a very different way, but maybe we've seen this in a different form or fashion, not the same dexterity of the room, but LSU took over Denver Harris, right, who had his issues at Texas A&M. They take him on as a transfer. It doesn't work out. He's out of there in 1 year. So that's the other thing that I think is interesting. You brought it up yesterday on the show. If you're Florida, and this was not a very good defense last year, and let's say things week 1 against Miami, they start to kind of show some holes in the boat. How quickly are people saying, we have to see Cormani McClain? And that's pretty much a rhetorical question because I think that starts right now. So that's another thing that Billy Napier is going to have to figure out how to navigate as well. And I think the other thing is, if you're Billy Napier, man, this is it. It's year 3. You got to figure it out. He's got to win now. So all of that is
Coop,
just kind of gas on the fire.
I'm picturing myself because I'm planning to be in Gainesville for the opener against I can see myself standing at a tailgate and plenty of people just talking about Cormani McClain. And it's like, did Florida really want to welcome this in? Like the Cormani McClain conversation? Like, did they need this? Did they need this distraction when there's already going to be a ton of people pushing for DJ Lagway to potentially play? Like that's the noise that they're welcoming in with this. But again, he was a 5-star prospect for a reason for us. He has all the traits, all the tools. I thought at Colorado, you want to dig into the tape, what he did there with the Buffs. Yeah, there were some growing pains. We knew there was going to be growing pains, but he found his footing. He made some plays there in the former Pac-12. So I get it for Florida. I just think, you're putting yourself in a situation where a lot of people are going to be asking where he is.
You can say whatever you want to say about Deion Sanders, but when it comes to young, talented defensive backs, especially Coach Prime in his first year, taking a liking to a guy like Cormani McClain, investing in him, and then talks about the only person stopping Cormani McClain is Cormani McClain. That's the big issue. And if a gold jacket Hall of Famer can't get to Cormani McClain, this is going to be a huge task, the biggest task of Will Harris's career, who I worked with, great coach, good human being. It's going to be a lot on him. So it's going to be up to him to get it right, and it would be pretty interesting to see how it works out. So,
Coop, just to jump in real quick, I was texting somebody a second ago, just kind of getting, I think that the vibe from everybody is that they want it to work out. But I guess, Florida's take on this is they don't see much of a downside in the fact that if it doesn't work out, it's just going to be done quickly. And it's not going to work out, and they're not going to let it, bother the locker room and the team vibes. But they took him with the feeling that he's humbled himself. He's completely different than the kid that they recruited out of high school. He's got some discipline, got some routine, daily routine, taking accountability for things in the past that have happened. And he's, like I said, he's completely different from the guy that they recruited and talked to and communicated with out of high school. So obviously we don't know how it's going to play out, but at least that's their stance. They don't see much of a downside to it. They don't think it's going to be a distraction or an issue, so that's kind of interesting. But again, for me, I like the take. I think it's a good move. But I think Ivins, you kind of mentioned this, like if it doesn't work out, you kind of move on quickly and don't let it, be a problem in the locker room.
All right, I'm going to ask this, and I know you guys don't follow the NHL, right? Even though you guys are both there in Smashville. Are you familiar with what happened with the Avs? They're in the playoffs. Star forward gets suspended. He's in this type of program they got where, they're drug testing, stage 3 of it. Basically suspended 6 months without pay in the middle of the playoff run. And I thought the comments from the players in that locker room were like, hey, this guy made his decisions. We're moving on. Like there's no hard feelings. It didn't become a distraction. Like they try to box it out as fast as they can. And I think Florida, the people in that building need to have the same mentality. It cannot become a storyline, right? As soon as Cormani chooses that fork in the road, which way this is going to work out, it's not going to work out. I mean, it's just got to be cut bait, move on, exactly like that.
Well, I think the example that comes up is Ajay Hall at Texas, right? Getting another opportunity coming over from Alabama. That didn't work out. They moved on, right? And I think a lot of people, there's a lot of discussion. Is this going to hurt their culture? What does that look like? And, it really didn't. It was really much about nothing. So I think if Florida has a quick trigger, if this goes sideways quick, I agree with Tom. I think the downside is limited. I just find it fascinating, Napier's a guy right now that every move has to be extremely calculated because every move is taken into consideration when trying to figure out or not, are him and his staff going to be part of the future there in Gainesville, right? So that's kind of how it plays into it. So going to be interesting. Matt Zennett's an incredible job breaking that news story as always. So Cormani McClain, we'll have our eyes on that. Certainly going to be a storyline throughout the offseason in the fall as well for the Florida Gators. All right, Tom, let's get back to it. Zaden Walker, you were just telling us about the number 1 linebacker in the country. Talked about those OVs, Georgia, Penn State, Miami, South Carolina. You were telling me the 2 programs at the top of the list were UGA. Who's the other one?
South Carolina. Yeah, and I think it's South Carolina in the end. I mean, obviously we have the official visits to play out, but there's a lot of confidence, a lot of optimism coming from the Gamecocks. I could see them getting it done. If I had to put in a crystal ball prediction today, it would be for the Gamecocks.
Drew, this dude, more than any other player in this class, is like built to play for the Georgia Bulldogs. So with that being said, regardless of the current, pulse of the recruitment, when they find something that they like, I think they kind of like, similar to KJ Bolden last year, and especially if that guy's in state. I don't know.
Keep an eye on Miami, right? They get attracted
Always
to shiny things, right? And Zaden Walker is someone that has been on campus multiple times. The potential fit that kind of excites me is Penn State, what they've done with some of the front seven defenders. And, Zaden Walker, I think you can have a conversation about what is his best role on Saturdays. Where is he going to find the most success? It is as an inside backer, as an edge rusher. I think you could formulate an argument for both sides. And I think about what Penn State has done, Chop Robinson, Abdul Carter. I can see Zaden Walker having a ton of success there. And I guess I'm the guy that's just giving reads on the recruitment. Hey, South Carolina, Shane Beamer, 5 stars in back-to-back cycles. I mean, can he do it again?
You love Penn State.
I'm going there this weekend, actually.
We've talked about this in the past. Your love for Penn. Every Penn State fan that's watching this needs to follow you on Twitter.
This is so false.
Dude, you went on a rant that one time about Penn State, and you were offended by something me and Coop said, but I love it, man.
He likes that. I think he's got great respect for Penn State, what they do defensively, especially when Manny was there, right? Zaden Walker, Abdul Carter is I like that, right? Those are two pretty similar players in terms of what you can do.
Fire that comp in right now on the profile.
Do you like it? Because I like it.
I like it.
Comes to mind a little bit. All right, gotten through Zaden Walker. Let's talk about our boy Babs, Andrew Babalola, number 15 player in the country, number 3 offensive tackle. Speaking of things we love, I love this kid. Spring trips, Alabama, Auburn, Tennessee. OV scheduled to Oklahoma in June. Missouri, Kansas State, Stanford, Michigan. I mean, this guy's all over the map here. Tom, what do we got for Andrew Babalola?
Yeah, I was making notes on this one, and I said the exact same thing. This one feels all over the place. Nobody has a really great pulse on where he's headed. I do know Tuscaloosa, so I can probably feel comfortable scratching them off the list at this point. But I was told to seriously watch a school that cares not just about football, but academics. That is going to be a big, heavy hitter in this recruitment. At that point, you got to watch Stanford. I was surprised Notre Dame wasn't involved as much as they were early on for whatever reason. So keep an eye on Stanford. Michigan is also in play. Oklahoma, Missouri, Kansas State. There's multiple schools involved, but the one thing I was told was academics. It's like the first thing that the family and Andrew himself bring up. So keep an eye on that. Stanford could pull off a pretty big upset here.
We've talked about Babs on the show, Drew.
Well, I got a question for Tom.
Okay, go ahead.
This recruitment seems to be all over the place. Is this a product of Babs trying to enjoy the recruiting process, or is he legitimately just looking around, sorting through his options? I have this theory with high-profile offensive linemen. If they treat the recruitments like a skill player, it usually does not pan out. If they have a business-like approach to it, usually those are the guys that are walking across the stage and shaking hands with the commissioners. So I've never met Babalola. I had no contact with him. I just want your feedback on that.
I like the way he's approaching his process. He's not all about social media and getting buzz and having guys make graphics for him and official visits and all this kind of stuff. I think he's doing a lot of things behind the scenes and doing things the right way. So for that, I like the upside in terms of the mental approach and how he's handling his business. He's not reaching out. He's never once talked about rankings well before he got a bump. Like none of that stuff ever comes up from him. So, or anybody around him. So I like the way he's going about it. I think he's genuine in his approach. And I just wish I could give you a better idea where I think he's going to, land at this point. But I was told distance could be a factor. He's close with his family. But then also they're like, Stanford is an option that sets him up for life. And that's obviously far from home. So again,
follow up. Is Stanford back? I'm looking at their visitors list. Joe Anthony Hall took an official, or he's going to take an official there. They're also supposed to get one from Josh Petty. It feels like Stanford when David Shaw was there.
Well, they are an ACC school, so I will say
What
this
does
about
that mean?
I'm just saying, we're talking about the distance. I mean, it's
Right,
kind of
right.
wild that, Stanford's in Palo Alto, off the coast of the Pacific Ocean, but they're in the Atlantic Coast Conference. What I'll say about Stanford, and, know a lot of people over there, competed against them when I was at UW, competed against them not so much when I was at Oregon. Those guys, when they get players to campus, it is a completely different experience in terms of competing against them on the recruiting trail. What they can sell at that university, the on-field development, it almost becomes secondary, and you start thinking about life after football very quickly, in terms of getting your degree from Stanford. And for years, in terms of offensive line development, they've been very, very tough to beat in the past. Like you mentioned, David Shaw. I like what they got going over there. Troy Taylor. They got a good staff. They got good people there. Al Netter is a guy that I worked with, who played his ball with the San Francisco 49ers. He GA'd at Michigan. He's familiar with that area. He's familiar with the part of the country that he's recruiting Andrew Babalola. There's a lot of selling points, so these are the guys. If you're Stanford, you have to understand there is one of these players a year, like Andrew Babalola, that have the physical ability and then also the intelligence to be able to go out there and are attracted to a place like Stanford and everything Stanford brings outside of football. So Stanford's hard to beat. They get Babs on campus. I would just legitimately tip the majority favorability in their direction. That's kind of the way I would go. And the other thing is, if you're Michigan, where are you? How are you not in pole position right now? What's going on there? That would be my guess. Maybe they're in this a lot more than I would think, but like this would be high prio number one with the guys that you would put in the league at the offensive line position. Sharon Moore, with all his credibility at that position, this one should be like slam dunk. No disrespect to Stanford, but you're not even in the same breath or conversation as us. And they're the only school outside of Stanford that is able to offer the high academic upside as well. And those are two different conversations, but at least they're in the conversation. So I don't, maybe I'm misreading the situation, but to me, like if this Michigan, I see this one on paper, this is a slam dunk for us. We're working overtime to get this one done.
Michigan's definitely involved, and I did mention them, but and I would be shocked if they didn't get an official visit at some point from him. But in terms of just overall confidence, I'd probably say Kansas State has the most right now. But right after that, you probably have Stanford and Michigan as the schools that feel the best at this point. So yeah, the Wolverines are definitely in it.
Is he going to make a decision this summer? What are we thinking?
He did. He said that initially, but it's been a while. So, obviously needs to lock in those official visits. And let's be honest, just because we haven't reported on him or he hasn't shared the official visits yet, like he's probably got him locked in. He just hasn't, again, it just goes back to how he handles his business and keeps things kind of private. It kind of like David Sanders showing up in Nebraska. That came together 48 hours before he stepped on campus. So he could take one visit and be done with it in no time because he's not really focused on the process.
I'd love to see Sharon Moore like stuff somebody in a locker when it comes to this recruitment. Where's that been? I mean, they're all capable of doing it, and we haven't seen it. So, like, if there was one person you're going to do that against, and it's Stanford and Kansas State, you just won the national championship. These dudes come through you. Like, where's that mentality? So, that's kind of where I'm at on Babalola. So that's going to be another fun one to watch, and a weird assortment of programs involved. You got everybody involved there. So next one, Jared Smith, top 20 player in the country, number 2 edge. Interesting. OV to Ole Miss. Ole Miss, Pete Golding, Lane Kiffin, that NIL collective. They said, hey, we've done some things in the portal. Now let's go down to the high school level. South Carolina, Georgia, Tennessee, Florida State, USC, all getting OVs. Alabama involved, Auburn involved. Tom, what do you think here?
Ole Miss is one that's very, very much in play for this one. He took the official visit kind of under the radar, kind of quiet. talked to him last week, and I asked him about the head coaches he's connecting with the most, and you could tell he lit up talking about Lane Kiffin. So that might be his favorite coach at this point. But he's got the OVs, the South Carolina, Georgia, Florida, Tennessee, Florida State, USC. There's a lot of different things. I mean, he kind of gave me quick hitters on each of them. He loves USC because of Coach Henderson and Aaron Donald and player development. Florida State really likes Mike Norvell, feels like that's his primary recruiter among the entire staff. With Tennessee, his relationship with Rodney Garner and the production along the defensive line. You got Florida, his connection with the coaching staff. He's actually taking an official visit to Florida on June 11th, which was not previously reported. He just gave me that this week. And then with Georgia, huge fan of Kirby Smart. Those are probably his two favorite coaches. You got Kirby Smart, Lane Kiffin, and then South Carolina really, really likes Shane Beamer. So, and he feels at home. He told me he felt at home at South Carolina. So everybody seems to be involved at this one. If I had an early crystal ball pick, which I don't feel comfortable with, would be Ole Miss. But he just kind of raved about everything that had to do with the Rebels, the visit, and all that stuff.
Drew, what do you think about this kid?
I think he needs to go somewhere where he's gonna sit a few years and get it right. All the traits in the world, and Coop, I brought this up behind the scenes in our scouting calls. You can take his Under Armour workout from 3 years ago, put it next to the Under Armour workout from 2 years ago, and then put it next to the Under Armour workout from this year, and it's kind of the same story, right? It looks like Goliath and isn't playing like Goliath just yet, but it is there. He has the traits. He's got the measurements. He's got the testing, massive features. Like you see him in cleats and you're like, are you wearing a size 20? Like, I don't think I've seen bigger cleats on someone. So to me, all these schools, I would hope he ends up at a program where it's not, hey, I'm forced into action right away. Now, is that Ole Miss, which you're going to look at the Rebels this season, their entire front seven and was built through the transfer portal. So I don't know what fit would be best for him in terms of a player development, but I think it's somewhere where, hey, he's going to get coached up and he's not going to be called upon year one and potentially even year two.
I agree. I love the physical traits. He's one of those guys, the physical traits alone keep you coming back, because they're just rare. You see the way that he moves, love him from a athletic standpoint, love him from an agility standpoint. Talk about the frame. He's got ability to put on weight. And then you watch him. A lot of what he does, at least production-wise, is, making plays in space based off that athleticism, that ability, that initial foot body quickness, the speed off the edge. You want to see him play to his frame. He has yet to do that. And I think part of this is you watch him, he's got the basketball background. He's a lot more of a basketball player than he is a football player right now. And that
way more finesse as a rusher.
That puppy needs to grow into a dog. So whatever place that's going to bring that out of him, that's going to be something to watch. A lot of different options at Tom. It doesn't seem like he's close to having this thing pinned down.
No, not at all. But he will make a summer decision. But he wants to take all these trips and then make a decision.
Hey, Tennessee, what about them? Went into Alabama last year, got Jordan Ross, James Pierce. He's developed nicely there in Knoxville. I could see that being a fit.
Yeah, Rodney Garner, he mentioned, might be his favorite position coach. So, again, he lit up talking about him. He appreciates the development. Clearly, Tennessee's in play.
Savvy, Drew. Good to point that out. Very smart. Lincoln Cure, number 2 tight end in the country, number 27 player overall. We got Ducks fans in here. They said the show's been going on for 34 minutes. I haven't heard anything about Oregon. All right, well, now you get it. All right, he's got an OV to Oregon June 14th. He's also got Kansas State in June. A&M seem to be the 3 teams involved. Tom, you got a crystal ball in on the Kansas State Wildcats right now. Kansas State, kind of fun, kind of like some of their stuff they're doing. They're in there for Babs too. When's the last time Kansas State signed a 5-star? When's the last time Kansas State could potentially – long way to go with the rankings, right? But as of right now, I mean, the 2 guys potentially in the top 32, that's a pretty good omen for these guys.
Lincoln and I were texting this morning, and he told me that his A&M official visit is officially locked in for June 7th. So he goes there. Then he goes to Oregon. There's your shout out for the Ducks on June 14th, and then Kansas State on June 21st. I think Oregon is absolutely surging. I think they are a major threat, more now than they've ever been in the past. But I'm not ready to change my crystal ball pick from the Wildcats. There's just too much there that I've heard over time, and I just don't see it changing quite yet. I just think it's going to be Kansas State in the end. They do a great job when it comes to NIL. They do a great job with the homegrown local talent. They proved that with Avery Johnson. There's just too much there. There's a lot of optimism. We talked about Andrew Babalola and Kansas State feeling good there. They feel great when it comes to Lincoln Cure, but more than Texas A&M, I'm really watching Oregon because they're really surging and making a run here. But again, my crystal ball is firmly still on Kansas State.
Drew, this seems to be one of those recruitments. I'd love under Dan Lanning to see if we could. Anytime Oregon's involved in a top 3, what their output is in terms of winning those recruitments, those head-to-heads. This just seems like one. I don't know why specifically, but once they start to kind of get their claws into a guy, and then Tom, you mentioned the NIL. I think Kansas State, Oregon's a really interesting battle because I think Kansas State's proven to be a legitimate factor, especially with kids in state. This one is, for Lincoln Cure, obviously going to be a real positive for him. But this one, I can see really getting aggressive between both programs.
How many tight ends is Oregon going to take? Their
tight end room is pretty nice. Not to mention, you got T-Ferg, Terrence Ferguson there this year. Kenyon Sadiq, who we loved. Tasson Brom, right? Another guy from Kansas.
I have Brom going to Oregon too. So
yeah,
well, they're going to get Caleb Edwards in, Michael Terry. You can have a conversation about him being a mid-skill utility knife. Like, where do you play him? I don't know. I look at the visitors list. You listen to Tom. You're right. Dan Lanning, aggressive on the recruiting trail. That's nothing new here. But program moving into the Big Ten is positioning themselves to potentially play a lot more 2 and 3 tight end sets. I noticed that when you look at the guys that they're going to bring in. Is Nate Roberts still going to visit there? Caleb Edwards? I mean, big selection when it comes to the tight ends.
Yeah, they're not messing around when it comes to NIL either. Like I know there was significant NIL offers on the table for Nate Roberts, and I know that if Lincoln Cure doesn't pick Oregon, he's going to turn down a significant offer. So Kansas State, like I said, they've proved that they can pony up when it comes to NIL, but Oregon's not messing around, so they're going to make it challenging.
Coach Phil Knight, man, he wants it. He wants that natty, and he wants it. He wants it soon. So now's the time to do it. I don't blame him. So Lincoln Cure, you heard it there first. Kansas State, Oregon, A&M also involved.
Just for accuracy purposes, I do believe he's going to take an official to Kansas right at the end of May, before the other ones. I just don't see Kansas being a factor in this race right now, at least.
All right, let's move on to some pass catchers. Jamie French, number 30 player in the country, number 4 receiver. Right behind him, Derek Meadows. Ohio State, the crystal ball leader for Jamie French. Derek Meadows, you got the crystal ball in for Notre Dame. Both those guys got a barrage of OVs set up. What can you tell us about both those guys?
Zach Blostein over at Knowles 24/7 caught up with Jamie this week and sent me over the interview to kind of check it out. And it's clear, like, everything he's saying is that Texas is the team to beat. Miami, Tennessee, very much involved. LSU is right there. They're all going to get official visits. My crystal ball's on Ohio State. Ivins, I know we talked about this a little bit.
Yeah, when are you changing that thing?
Ohio State's been the longtime favorite, and I know what he's saying. I get how this game works. Been doing it a long time. I'm not ready to change my crystal ball, pick off the Buckeyes. I checked in on it and I said, like, is there really any truth to this? And I checked on, sources all over the place. And yeah, there's definitely some legitimacy about Texas, and they are making a big run to get him. And that staff is doing a phenomenal job. But I know that there's some behind the scenes games being played as well. And it's just going to be interesting, but I am not ready to change my crystal ball pick from the Buckeyes. But if he does set a commitment date and doesn't take the official visit to Ohio State, when he keeps talking about taking in the fall, because now he's saying that he wants to make a decision at the end of the summer. So the timelines aren't going to work out in favor of Ohio State. But again, I'm not ready to change that pick yet.
Drew, question for you. I mean, like, all right, let's put on our little GM cap here and let's zoom out. And as much as we love talking about the purity of the college football game that has been soiled in the last couple of years. If I'm Ohio State, listen, I like Jamie French a lot, but compared to the receiver crop that we had last year, and you look at Ohio State's ability to identify talent exceptionally well at that position, I don't know if I'm like gung-ho about having to meet maybe the top dollar of what Texas or one of these other schools would have to pay for Jamie French. That doesn't seem like something I have to go do right now. Does that make sense?
It does. And I think you're going to talk about themes of the cycle. How does Ohio State's wide receiver class come together? They had Javon Boggs committed. He's back on the market. Desi Jones in the boat right now, but they they're in play kind of with everyone out there. And it's almost like quarterback dominoes, but you have these Ohio State wide receiver dominoes because for good reason, a lot of these kids want to play for Brian Hartline and the Buckeyes, even with Jeremiah Smith there. Like that's the school you go to if you're an elite wide receiver. And they can only take so many of them, right? Every year they try to jam as many as they can into the class. They find ways to do it, but like Talon Taylor is going to visit. Tom, who else is set to come in? Like I keep coming across these receivers and I'm like, whoa, okay, like Ohio State's involved. So I want to know how it shakes out. Who do they choose as their kind of guys? Who do they draft in this group, in this wave of receivers? And those are the ones that end up at Ohio State. Because I think once that group is settled on, the rest of these receiver dominoes are going to fall.
Quincy Porter and
love me some Quincy Porter.
Right. So, and again, there's so much like almost uncertainty about all these other guys, but the confidence has been there for so long when it came to Jamie French. Again, there's just too much there that like something changed overnight, or really it didn't. And there's just a lot of factors that like aren't public and things like that. So I'm just not ready to change it. I just think that there's maybe some gamesmanship being played behind the scenes and maybe like, some of these kids, and I'm not speaking for Jamie, but you see a lot of times where guys just assume they know where he's going. You see the crystal ball picks or predictions and things like that. Maybe he's trying to play a little bit of a game here and get people thinking something else. So he shocks the world when he makes a commitment to Ohio State.
I think those days are over.
Maybe, or there's other factors in play, regarding playing coy about your interest, or maybe that you're slipping for somebody. I'm just saying, I'm not ready to change that pick yet.
He's a top 32 player in the country. I think we can guess what's going on. I mean, listen, people are starting to come to the table. They're getting that time on their board where they got to make decisions and they got to, are you in or are you out? What does it look like? Right. So, I keep going back to it. As much as we can play the relationship game and traditional recruiting and what gloves is he wearing, those days are over.
What gloves is he wearing?
Like those days they're done. They don't mean anything anymore. All right, Derek Meadows. Let's talk about him. Notre Dame, they've done a tremendous job with this kid, especially getting him to camp last year. OVs to Tennessee, Georgia, the Irish as well, Alabama. An interesting one. We hitched our wagon to him. He's just unique. We've talked about him multiple times. 6'6" hard to find a guy that moves the way that he does. Waiting for the production to match. He's got a big year coming up this year at Bishop Gorman. What's the feel on him? I kind of wonder, outside of Notre Dame, are these teams all in on Derek Meadows, or is it kind of more like wait and see mode? Let's get you to campus, do our due diligence, and then after 4 games, we'll let you know if you got the green light.
Every single one of these 4 teams would take him immediately. No question about it. They all seem to, I think he's checked enough boxes to this point to where they would push for him. But I'm still not ready to change my crystal ball pick from Notre Dame. I think they've done a great job since day one. I know Chancey Stuckey was initially the primary recruiter, and he's gone. Tommy Reese was involved. He's gone. But now it's Mike Brown and Mike Denbrock. And that relationship couldn't be better. Mike Brown's done a great job of checking in with him at Bishop Gorman. Mike Denbrock's gotten involved. And obviously Chad Bowden and Marcus Freeman are doing a great job there as well. So Tennessee has been involved, and they're definitely one to watch. Same with Georgia. I think Alabama is the one that intrigues him the most outside of Notre Dame. He's got a relationship that goes back to when those guys were at Washington. So again, I'm watching Notre Dame and Alabama. Those are probably the top 2 right now. And it's, they get the final 2 visits there, June 14th to South Bend, June 21st to Tuscaloosa. I think that the early playing time is there. I know you guys talked about it a couple weeks ago about landing. Notre Dame needs to land guys like Derek Meadows, Talon Taylor, things like that. And I think this is a big fish for them. And I think he's a guy that can play early in South Bend. And I like the Irish to get it done.
Can Notre Dame win an NIL recruitment against Alabama if it comes to it?
I don't think Alabama would be the big threat.
That's fair. Yeah. And I think that they're in a much better position than they used to be, to where that any offer that goes to Derek Meadows is going to be one that it's not going to be something that's so much lower than other schools that are on the table here. Obviously, Tennessee isn't one to mess around, and they're going to, they'll be a player here. But I think in terms of NIL and the big picture here, I really don't, and maybe I'm stupid or naive to say this, but I don't think that's priority number one for the Meadows family. I really think that relationships are going to play a big factor here, and one that they really like Marcus Freeman, and there's a lot of trust there. So I think that's helping them a lot.
Drew, why wouldn't Alabama be a threat there?
Well, compared to like Tennessee, what they've been able to do in the NIL space, no. Derek Meadows has come a long way. I feel like after the Battle Miami tournament back in January, it was like Notre Dame and who else? And now you look at that official visit list, and it's like, all right, it's self-corrected here. The big boys are involved. Coop, do we have a player comp for Derek Meadows yet?
Nope. I mean, you can't call him a unicorn and then comp him to somebody. Okay. I mean, the guy, they're really different. I don't know. The biggest reach would be like Drake London, and even those two don't really mesh, in my opinion.
This is not a clean comp in terms of like measurables are off, speed markers are off, but I think you could have like a T-Mac type impact.
He's
different.
He's different in the fact that he's like he's not as loose or fluid as a guy like T-Mac, not as bouncy either, but he is explosive and vertical. I don't know. Okay. There's so much of his game that we just haven't seen yet. We've seen flashes of it, but we haven't actually seen it so much on the field, right? So there's a big, I don't want to say question mark, but there's a lot of excitement to actually see what this dude can be. And Tom, I think you saw him 7-on-7 circuit. He was doing some crazy things. The Bishop Gorman workout was one of the best workouts I've seen. And people will say, oh, well, I'm not talking about like combine workout testing numbers. I'm talking about this guy at 6'6" moving the way that he does is just pretty rare. So I think there's a lot that needs to come together, but he's a fun one for sure.
I was told that the Bishop Gorman quarterback situation and Micah Eugenio, and there's a couple guys that are involved, but they're going to feed him the rock this year. He's going to get every opportunity to have a massive season. So I think all of that stuff's going to work out really well, especially when you compare it to the ranking.
Wow. They got Matter Day, first week of September. Tune in.
What channel is that going to be on? The Ocho?
Hopefully Greg Biggins, our compadres on the call.
Valley Sports, baby. Let's go. All right. Nathaniel Owusu-Boateng, number 45 player in all the country, number 4 linebacker. Ivins, going to see him today?
Tonight, yeah.
Let's go, baby. A little live eval for the boys. Recently named a top 13. Shout out. Love some top 13s. But let's cut that from 13 to 6. Let's just cut that in half, Tom. USC got an unofficial. It's got OVs to USC, Notre Dame, Ohio State, Michigan, Georgia, South Carolina. A lot of the same of the usual suspects. Let's try to cut that 6 to maybe a 3 if that's doable. What do you see here?
Unless he's playing games, and I was really surprised that when he sent me his final, well, not his final 4, but the 4 official visits, I was shocked that Georgia and South Carolina, you guys okay? Georgia and South Carolina were not involved in there, and it shocked me. But I'm thinking that he's going to stay in the Midwest. It's going to be Notre Dame, Ohio State, Michigan. Has great relationships with all of those coaches. They all have optimism that can land him. His brother Jeremiah Owusu-Boateng was a star in South Bend. Marcus Freeman, I just feel like I think they can get this one done. I wouldn't have said that maybe a month or 2 ago. I think that they've always had optimism. They had a great unofficial visit over the winter, but getting him back for the official, the only problem there is you're getting him early, and he's still got to go to Michigan and Ohio State after that. So Notre Dame and Ohio State are going to battle for a lot of top linebackers this cycle. So like Madden Faramo and a couple others, but it'll be interesting. But those 3 are probably the biggest players at this point.
Those 2 programs seem to have a different profile at the linebacker position or what they want. You know, you look at Ohio State, it's more like Tommy Eichenberg, bigger, physical, downhill, between the tackles type of guys. And I think that really benefits Notre Dame because I think Owusu-Boateng is more your speed and space guy, but is also physical enough to bang between the tackles as well. I love his versatility. I love this fit for Marcus Freeman. I mean, it does. I say this, it gets me very, very excited to see the progress that Notre Dame has made. But like, if they can pull off a Meadows, if they can pull off an Owusu-Boateng, this is what we said, Drew, a couple years ago, right? It was Keeley, it was Dante Moore, it was Peyton Bowen. You know, they got left at the altar of those guys, but they have gotten back in the ring every single time. And here they are with a chance to really add some legit top end talent to their roster here in 2025.
And they've held on to Deuce Knight. Yeah, USC's the school that jumps out to me on this list. I know you just kind of handicapped it as a race between all those Midwest schools, but that would be like the bow on the potential defensive haul for the Trojans. I mean, think about speed and space linebacker and Owusu-Boateng running behind Justice Terry, Isaiah Gibson. They got Hilton Stubbs committed. You know, we've knocked on USC's defense in recent years, and for good reason. But this is the kind of class they need to shore things up and not rely on the transfer portal.
I like the fit. They just got to hold on to all those guys that they have and then land.
I know.
I mean, it's just, it's tough, man. And the USC fans get all worked up because we're reporting on, you know, Julian Lewis and all these guys but they're taking visits. I mean, we're just doing our jobs and reporting. So until they completely shut it down, you got like Isaiah Gibson taking visits to Georgia and things like that. So if USC can hold on to all these guys, man, what a class it's going to be, but we'll see.
I do want to make sure I ask you at the end of this segment about Julian Lewis. We didn't have that on the rundown, but I am interested to, you know, want to get some more context on the Indiana visit. All right, last two here. We're almost at an hour, so we got to pick up the pace here a little bit. Damian Shanklin, top 50 player, number 6 edge in the country. Final four on Tuesday didn't include Notre Dame, which was long considered a favorite to land him. LSU, Ohio State, Tennessee, Alabama. And then he'll make a decision. And then Vernell Brown, certainly a name that continues to pop up. He released a top 4 on Tuesday, Ohio State, Miami, Florida, and FSU. You currently have a crystal ball on the Buckeyes. Let's start with Shanklin. Tom, what can you tell us about that one?
Yeah, I reported a month or two ago that Notre Dame was kind of slipping with Shanklin, and both sides essentially parted ways. So we knew that when it came down to finalists, they weren't going to be involved. But LSU, Ohio State, Tennessee, and Bama, initially it was looking like Ohio State versus Notre Dame. So naturally, I felt like Ohio State was going to be the biggest player here, and I definitely think they are. He's got a great relationship with Larry Johnson, and he called Ohio State his dream offer. But LSU's got a lot of buzz. They had an offseason visit there. He's coming back for the official on May 31st. Tigers are definitely being played. That would be a huge win for Brian Kelly and the staff. But in the end, I mean, I still kind of lean towards Ohio State in that one. And then for Trey Brown, I don't love my crystal ball pick for Ohio State right now. I think that they're probably, I don't know if I would call them 4th out of the top 4 right now, but he's going to take the official visit on May 31st, and it's going to be a great opportunity for Brian Hartline and those guys to get it done. But I honestly, my gut says he's going to stay in state. I think Florida is working real hard to get him to try to flip Tramel Jones from Florida State. The Gators are pushing a lot of the right buttons here, and then Florida State, good for them. They get the final crack at him. So that would be a big win for them as well.
Drew, what do you think about Vernell Brown, Florida State? Any of those pop out to you?
Well, I didn't know he was going by Trey now, but I think if you're Florida, it's pretty easy to be like, hey, come be you're Trey Brown. You can come be Trey Wilson for us there and catch a bunch of passes and be utilized in the same way. So I think Florida certainly. I mean, his sister runs track there in Gainesville. His dad played for the Gators. His dad worked for the football program. I'm just fired up that we got a recruiting battle between the big 3 in state, Florida, Florida State, and Miami. It's been a while since we've had one of those. I know that these programs are going to play each other this upcoming season, but it seems like, you know, we haven't had as many of them where all 3 are fighting for the same kid. So I think in that offense there, and potentially, you know, jet sweeps, moving them around, motioning, creating mismatches, that's a perfect role for Trey Brown. I guess is it what we're called? Is that official? Do we need to change the profile?
Vernell Brown.
Is it Vernell or Trey?
It's Vernell, but he just goes by Trey as well. Man.
All right, good to know. Dude, you never know. I mean, we got we're very sensitive about this.
I'm not updating the profile.
And you know what? You know what's funny about the Eugene Wilson, Vernell Brown? First time I saw Eugene Wilson playing safety on the 7-on-7 circuit. First time really saw Vernell Brown and evaluated him playing safety on the 7-on-7 circuit. And obviously those guys are explosive playmakers in the slot.
All right, Tom, before we get out of this segment, I do want to ask you about Julian Lewis. You created quite a stir when you broke that news, or I guess Julian Lewis did. You're just reporting the news. But he's got an OV to Indiana. When is that supposed to take place?
May 31st, I believe. Yeah, that'll be the first one. They replaced Georgia, took a commitment. I mean, I remember when we first kind of popped on with Ivins, we were talking about it with Emily, and took a lot of flack for saying Indiana was at least involved. He's got a great relationship with Tino Sinceri going back to his days in Tallahassee at Florida State. So that connection is real. The relationship is strong. Do I think he's going to flip and land at Indiana, despite them having actual optimism and thinking that they're the biggest threat alongside Auburn? My guess would be that if he flips, I think it's going to be Auburn. I think the Tigers are in a really good spot there, but I've said it before. I still think it's a great fit at USC. It's just, we'll see if they can hold on to him.
Drew, what does USC do if Julian Lewis doesn't stick?
I got options out there, right? Madden Yamalieva. I believe, did he visit or
especially if UCLA is involved as they are, I would start turning the heat up on him. I think that'd be really good.
I'd expect them to be big time in the transfer market. I mean, it just hadn't, Jaden Maeva, Miller Moss. When's the last time? Not to take anything away from Miller Moss, I think could have a big year this year.
Okay, I got two names for you.
Hold on, you gotta let me finish my thought.
Oh, sorry, I thought you were done. Sorry.
When's the last time that a Lincoln Riley quarterback room has kind of looked like this? Had this shape of not knowing who that guy is. And I mean, you go all the way back. He's had the guy. That room right now kind of seems like it's a big question mark.
All
right, go ahead. You can finish your thought. Yep.
I mean, I'm going to be like Tom in Masters of Air here, taking a bunch of flack for saying this. But what about like Camario Taylor? Potentially. Think about it. Lincoln Riley was very high on DJ Lagway, not saying they are the same player, but physical upside traits. I think you could make a comparison there. And we don't know what's going to happen with Camario Taylor. And then what about Malik Washington? Our guy Hudson Standish saw him this past weekend out at the New Jersey camp there, Under Armour camp. I watched the footage. Guy that's going to be on my freaks list. And USC has been in the DMV recruiting. They already got a few guys committed there from that region. So I don't know if he checks the boxes off for Lincoln Riley, but to me, Malik Washington, why have more schools not pivoted to him when it comes to the quarterbacks?
For me, it would be there's two guys. It would be KJ Lacey and Deuce Knight. They've both shown that they're not wishy-washy, but they're at least talking to other schools. I think that USC should absolutely go all in there if Julian decides to look elsewhere. I think that would be my question is, what if Miller Moss never starts the bowl game? What if Caleb plays it? I'd just be curious to see if they ended up, going to hit the transfer portal, if they would have brought somebody in who would be their quarterback right now if that didn't happen.
Yeah, I mean, we always have these stories like recruiting what ifs, transfer what ifs. Like, what if Caleb Williams played in the bowl game and we never got Miller Moss? Like, who transfers into USC? How does that all shake out?
Will Howard, maybe. Maybe there's a little bit more urgency there. What about Keelan Russell? I mean, I don't know. Do we have a pulse? Do we have a pulse check on him? What's going on with him?
I mean, it's all quiet. He's going to take official visits and stuff, but SMU still feels good, and I love that for them.
You can't overlook SMU. SMU would be one of those teams that I think, I wouldn't be shocked to see what's on the table if SMU had the most attractive offer for Keelan Russell.
I don't know who I was watching from the Elite 11 regional in Texas. Big group of quarterbacks standing there. I was not watching Keelan Russell, but he was one of those guys standing in line. It's like, who the heck is that? It's like, oh, it's Keelan Russell. Okay.
Always a good thing.
Yeah.
It's always a good thing.
Actually, before quickly, Ivins, or either of you guys, if you watched him, but Antoine Hill, would he be a fit at USC, or would you even make a run at him?
I mean, if you got to the point where you're like, I don't want to put it this way, but you need a body. Antoine Hill, in my mind, is just sitting out there. His recruitment is very odd to me. I think I think most likely he probably ends up at a place like Memphis.
Love the tools, just very good, bad, good, bad, good, bad, good, bad, good, bad.
Peaks and valleys. All right, guys, I got to continue to move this show along. We're already at 1 hour, 1 minute. So everything from here, hurry up offense, up tempo. Let's go. 247sports.com. Everything you need, all your scouting, your recruiting information, you can find on 247sports.com. Also, 24/7 Sports YouTube channel. Make sure to like and subscribe. Help the Oyster Boys out. Helps us keep the lights on, as Josh Pate always likes to say. Let's get to our next segment now. 3-star recruits generating some buzz. Tom, in the meantime, this is probably going to be a little bit of a volley between me and Andrew. Find some questions in the chat that you like, because I know that people are very, very excited to have you. And they've been asking for a long time. They want recruiting information. A lot of the time, the boys are pretty limited just to the evaluation side. So see what you can find there. Drew, Nick Clayton, number 51 edge in the country. He's got OVs, Nebraska. Just took an OV to Nebraska, excuse me. Also got UCF, Duke, USF. Recent offers, Florida State, USC, Illinois, Michigan State. You had him as an eye catcher at Orlando. Tell us about this kid.
Yeah, I mean, Tom came up kind of with this idea, when I saw Nick Clayton visited Nebraska, some 3-stars. Hey, 3-stars are still players. 3-stars can still get drafted.
3-stars are people too.
Yeah, we only got, I'm making that shirt. Only so many bullets in the top 247. But this is a guy I loved at that Under Armour camp in Orlando. Not surprised his recruitment has taken off. He's also got a trip set up to Tulane. Easy to see why USC and Florida State have got involved. I think Florida State is the notable one here with Nick Clayton, what they have done at that edge rushing spot here over the years in terms of developing guys. And Cooper, we always bring it up, like the guys in Tallahassee are pretty dialed in with their evaluations. And to me, Nick Clayton, he can bend. The production is not there yet. Only 10 pressures, 3 sacks as a junior, but he's got a guy with the arrow that is pointing up, has a triple jump over 40 feet. I think he's someone we'll be talking about. And if you are one of these programs, right, that is going after the big fish, you want to fill out the back end of your class with a Nick Clayton type, someone that you can develop. And in this era, if it doesn't work out, hey, he moves on to somewhere else and you bring in a transfer. What did you think of him, Cooper?
I liked him. I mean, it was very, very limited in terms of what I saw, but just in terms of the get off, you see the frame, obviously the ability to go speed to power, but high motor, not a clean comp. There's a little Braylon Trice there that kind of reminded me of him. So, Braylon Trice, I mean, I go back to Braylon Trice when we evaluated him, was a guy that we thought was like a purple player, right? So the equivalent of what we called a winnable player. I think that would be somebody that is in the current range of where we have Nick Clayton currently ranked, right? As an 87 overall rating.
I don't think he's very far off from where he is.
But there was more in the body and more developmental upside than we thought. So yeah, maybe it's a reach on Trice, but you get the idea. Trying to paint a picture, of a guy that kind of fit in. Corey Sims, another guy. I like this kid. OV's set up to USC, Nebraska, Mizzou, Ole Miss in here. Ole Miss seems to just be dialed in on these receiver evals. 6'3", 202 from St. Louis, ran mid 4.7s, but strong. Strong at the catch point. Good run after catch ability as well. You saw him at OT7, Drew. What'd you think of him?
Yeah, I mean, you look at that group of schools, and Coop, you would agree with me here, man. It is getting really hard to stack this wide receiver class. Like, there are a ton of names. How do we want to put them in there? Who do we want to shoot up the board? I think Corey Sims, don't know if he's going to be in the top 247 in this upcoming update. But if your school gets him, I mean, there's a lot to like. I think he's got ready to play size, having seen him in person, over 1,000 yards. 4.7 in the 40 is going to turn some away. But I wouldn't really be all that concerned about it in terms of his body control, what he's able to do after the catch. I think he's a guy that can play in the SEC. He can play in the Big Ten. And, Missouri is the one that jumps out to me. Got Matt Zollers committed. Luther Burden's eventually going to leave. And someone else is going to have to catch passes there.
He's going to leave next year, So I love this fit for Mizzou in the way that they have mobilized their NIL department. You think they would be in good shape. So Corey Sims, name to know. And then here's another one. CJ Jim Coley. Did I get that right?
Jim Collie.
Jim Collie.
Graphics wrong.
It is?
There's no space.
Yeah.
Well, I thought the spelling was Jim.
Yeah, it's just one.
Oh, the graphic's wrong. I
Yeah,
wasn't even looking at
good,
the graphic. I wasn't doing a Ron Burgundy. I was really trying to figure out if it was Jim Collie or Jim Coyley. Anyway, man, you talk about an interesting kid. I got to, studied him a lot. He's in my area. He plays corner, a little bit of overhang safety as well. 6'3", 206 in Nashville at the UA camp last month. 6'6" wing. He ran high 4.7s, 10-foot broad, super explosive lower body. Tom, after your text this morning, talking about you thinking that he was going to be a backer, listen, I completely agree here. I think this kid is not even close to done growing. I mean, he's got a long way to go in terms of his physical growth potential. Drew, I don't think we've had one of these guys in quite some time. None comes to my mind, but like, this dude's working out at corner and he's holding his own, not to the point where I think, all right, this guy's going to be a corner at the next level or even a safety. But if you view him in the sense of making the move to linebacker, you're like, holy cow, I really like this athletic profile. So that's when he starts to pop. There's some questions that he has to answer, with the physicality, being able to play between the tackles, but just in terms of the range, the ability to play sideline to sideline, you can get really excited about this kid pretty quickly.
Yeah, Tom, what's going on the recruitment? Alabama just offered, a bunch of schools are in there. Yeah, you want to rattle those off?
Yeah, Tennessee, Ole Miss, Bama, Stanford, and LSU for CJ.
Stanford's back, baby. Coop, to me, ideal sub-package defender, right? Early on in his career, can probably play in the nickel and match with tight ends. I agree, would not stick him outside as a corner. If he's going to be a true inside backer, he's got to get more physical. But I love the growth potential. I mean, he has a wide frame. You watch him run that 40, he like takes up the entire lane, like in a good way. He's not narrow in any sense. Easy to see why a bunch of schools, I'm assuming they're going and evaluating him in person, watching that UA footage, and why he's moved up the board for a number of people.
I mean, it's probably starting to sink in with him. A lot of conversations that these coaches are probably having during the spring is, hey, have you thought about linebacker? And sometimes you have to massage those things, especially when you got a high profile recruitment like this kid. Sometimes it's just one of those things, get him in the building. And then after that first spring ball playing corner, let me show you the tape of you getting roasted a couple times and why I think linebacker's best for you, but I like the kid. I mean, I think you and I, the rest of the team, are going to have to go back to the drawing board and kind of see him through that lens and kind of see where he racks and stacks there. All right, guys, you guys have been awesome. We're at hour 10 here. You're hanging around. We appreciate you. I think we're over 2,000 viewers on X. Kind of fires me up. Love that. Let me read one more promo. 24/7 Sports Live happens every Thursday, 5 o'clock Eastern Time, on the 24/7 Sports channel. Emily Proud, Carl Reed, Smoke Dixon, some of the best talent 24/7 Sports has to offer. You can find them on the 24/7 Sports channel. 5 o'clock Eastern time. Like I said, make sure to like and subscribe. We really appreciate that. It's a pleasure, as always, to have Tom Loy on the show, the best in the business, second to none. And part of it is the peeps got questions, and they got questions about, all right, how is our team recruiting? So, Tom, just got your text. Let's we got to start with Canes Cats, because Canes Cats, I saw you in the chat earlier, man. You've been mixing it up. Love that. Canes Cats, guys, he said something earlier about, he said, I'm an oyster boy. He said, I'm in this show every single day, every Tuesday and Wednesday. I'm in here. I'm an oyster boy. I know who's who. Love that energy out of Canes. Canes Cat, you are an oyster boy. I want to let you know that. But he says, question to Tom. Tom, you put a crystal ball in for SJ. Not even going to pretend to pronounce that last name. To Miami 2 months ago. For the spring game, I heard that we cooled on him. Now we're pushing hard for him, question mark. Why did we cool on him at first? In-person eval, question mark. All right, so a lot of questions there. But let's just start with the recruitment. SJ, how do we say the last name?
Alofa-Tuli.
Alofa-Tuli. From
Nailed.
Bishop Gorman, one of the best centers in the country. And I would say one of the most day one ready interior offensive linemen in the country as well. Tom, it seems like Miami and Alofa-Tuli have been in good standing with each other for quite some time. What can you tell us about this one?
Yeah, that's news to me that Miami had cooled on him at any point. I think there's 2 crystal ball picks, and I believe Gabby's the other one who does a phenomenal job over our Miami site at 24/7. But yeah, I got around him at the Next One's event at Bishop Gorman in Vegas, and it seemed pretty clear Miami was the team to beat then. Felt comfortable with my crystal ball pick. I made it after that trip. And when I found out Miami was, had him at the top of the board, he's got a great relationship with the entire staff, loves Mario Cristobal. I think there's some others in play. You got Oregon, Bama making a run, all that. But I just think in the end, I think it's going to be tough for him to not pick Miami just because of the long relationship he's got there with the staff. And I fully expect the Canes to get that one done.
Drew, what do you think about him? He's a pretty interesting guy. He's not like your prototypical, more high floor than ceiling, but maybe one of the most well-rounded interior prospects I think we've seen in a while.
I wish we had him in the All-American Bowl as our center. I think he's committed to the Under Armour game. No, Mario Cristobal lineman all the way. Alex Mirabal. I'm a fan.
No reason to sugarcoat it. All right, let's go to our next question. Living rent-free in UT. Good to see you, brother. He says, hey, Tom, which quarterback is most likely to join Texas's 26 class? Diabell or Troy Hoon?
Oof, Troy Hoon.
Diabell is
he always asks about Troy Hoon. I feel like every few weeks.
I like Troy Hoon.
There's nothing wrong with that.
I think it's going to be first one in. I really don't know who's more likely, but Diabell's got a ton of interest. But the other school that I'm watching, and you're going to love this, Ivins, Penn State. I think Diabell is probably leaning towards Penn State right now. Texas is going to go up there and throw, I think, end of this month. But if he feels it, who knows? Maybe he jumps in and steals the spot. But Troy Hoon, very much involved there. Also got an offer from Washington. They've got some optimism that they can make a run there. So I'm not ready to say which one's most likely to go there. It's still a battle for both.
Troy Hoon is kind of more like Trey Owens-ish.
Yes. It's good. You know what I do think is notable, and it's still early. We put together that 2026 top 247. Texas, not a ton of established quarterbacks at this stage in that class. And I think this will be the year some of those guys emerge. But we're talking about UT, and they've had to cast a wide net.
I'll tell you this. I think only Andrew knows this. I'm a huge fan of Diabell. And Texas is an interesting fit. I'm surprised Penn State has kind of wiggled their way in there very, very early. But, I think that kid's got a chance to be one of the best pure passers in the 2026 class. So
Penn State's got to figure out the 2025 quarterback situation, in my opinion.
Beckham Kritza. I mean, they were rolling, dude. I mean, Jackson Smolik, Grunkmeyer. You were like, oh, okay. And then the coordinator change and the wonky take of Kritza. It's like, what are you doing? You had it going. I don't You know, Zollers goes to Mizzou. It's like, come on, man. That was a don't understand that at all.
Yeah, I think that one threw them for a loop. I think that for a while they felt like they were going to get Matt, and then he didn't. So
they don't have anybody to blame but themselves. They threw us for a loop. Why are you taking a quarterback, a multi-time transfer? Don't get me started on this. When you don't have a coordinator in place, and then you have a guy like Zollers, regardless of where he was ranked at the time, in your own state that you think could emerge, and you leave the door open for somebody like Missouri and Georgia. It makes zero sense. That's one of the more like head-scratching personnel decisions I think I've seen in a while when it comes to quarterback. We got a question from well 32. Question for the guys. If we had to make a prediction, where's Javon Boggs end up?
My best guess would be Missouri today. I think Georgia is definitely in play, and I haven't confirmed 100% that they are all in, doing everything they can to get him. But I think the safe, smart money would be on Missouri right now. I think the Tigers are doing a great job. They love the kid. They're trying to get him. They're trying to get Donovan Olubade. I would love that if you can pair those two with Zollers and moving forward.
And Corey Sims.
Matthew Ivins.
All right, T-Dub wants to know who's the next commit for Ohio State.
I went and saw Marion Dye at Elkhart, Indiana, a couple weeks back, and I know he's going to take an official visit this summer, sooner rather than later. I don't remember the exact date, but when I was there, Larry Johnson was there, Jim Knowles was there. He's a big priority for Ohio State. I know that initially it was Ohio State versus Georgia for him. I know Georgia's they had an eye-opening visit. I think Ohio State gets it done though.
What about Isaiah West, running back, top 247 running back?
I guess that'd probably be the best bet for the most immediate next commitment, which is the question that was asked. So good point there. Yeah, that one seems like a slam dunk.
I'm a fan.
Okay. I got to see if I have this one, Mark. Paraphrasing here. Josh Buffo, the motivational business banker. He's got a question about landing spots for Madden Faramo, Boateng as well, Brady Hart, Noah Grubbs. What you got there, Tom?
Madden Faramo could be Notre Dame or Ohio State, I think. And I'd probably say the same thing with Owusu-Boateng. I like Notre Dame to get it done with 2026 quarterback Noah Grubbs. And then Brady Hart is a little bit more intriguing. He's got a ton of options. He seems less likely to make a decision this summer. I was leaning towards Notre Dame, but again, I think Noah will steal that spot. And then I'm watching Florida for him, but then does Will Griffin take that spot? Maybe you've heard some rumblings there in Florida, Ivins. Yeah, I think that was all of them. Oh, North Carolina is also, has caught Brady Hart's eye for a while.
If I had a crystal ball, it'd be on Florida.
You do. You can have one. Throw it in there. Just fire it.
Just like my first pick in 2 years.
You're saying for Brady Hart?
Yeah, but like him and Will Griffin,
yeah,
both have like very strong family ties to Florida. Like Florida is in a situation where it's like, all right, you can choose whatever one you want, or you can go in a completely different direction, find another quarterback.
I think he was leaning heavy towards Florida until he took the trip to Notre Dame, and then hanging out with CJ and those guys. I mean, he told me flat out they were the leader after the visit, but he seems less intrigued to make a decision early. And I think Noah will make one in July. So.
All right, Drew, one for us, and then we're getting out of here. Canes Cats. See you, baby. He says, question to Andrew and Cooper. Piggybacking off of LSU receiver coach yesterday, Cortez Hankton, by the way, great interview. If you want to watch that, you can find that on the 24/7 Sports YouTube channel. How big is the in-person eval for you guys and college coaches, and what are you guys looking for besides their play? I'll let you have first dibs there, Drew.
I thought Cortez kind of brought this up. How does a guy practice? And it's certainly not the end all be all, especially, we're not signing these kids. Like, our career is not on the line if this kid shows up and, isn't able to perform. But how do they treat practice? How do they treat those reps? I think specifically with the wide receivers, and I'll bring up an example, Christian Leary, who was a highly recruited player, I think in the 2020 cycle. I went back and forth with some of the guys about his ranking. He had the track times, went to see him play, and he just didn't do it for me on a snap-to-snap basis. And you look at Christian Leary now, left Alabama. I think he's at Georgia Tech. I know he made a big catch at some point during the season, but hasn't lived up to the billing. So I think how do they practice? How do they handle every rep? What does it look like when they know they're not getting the football? Are they a two-way player? Are they playing on special teams? Are they a leader? Are they a first in line type of guy? Are they, strolling out to practice? I also think body typing is so important. Coop, I have the privilege of getting to read your notes sometimes and the other guys. And it's like, all right, looks this big. And then in my head, it's like, well, no, I've seen this kid in person. The tape can be a little bit deceiving in terms of what someone looks like actually when you size them up. So I think those are two important things. Coop, you got more?
No, I think from, piggybacking off of what Cortez said yesterday, these guys are on their best behavior when they go to camp, right? When they're working out on campus. And Coach Hankton brought it up. He said, if they're struggling to put in effort in front of us, then what's it going to look like when they get here? Because this is their biggest audition that they have. And for us on the media side, I like the fact that we're part of the side of the industry that just kind of blends in, right? There are no collegiate coaches when we go to the Elite 11 regionals. There's no collegiate coaches when we go to these UA Next combines. So as Andrew said, and Coach Hankton pointed out, body language is key, especially when you're looking at these quarterbacks. Every little thing is something, and you start to put the puzzle pieces together. Are these guys taking coaching? Are they asking questions in between reps? Are they really there to get better? Or are they there to, just check a box? And sometimes you can see the progression of a guy when he's a sophomore and he wants to earn it and he doesn't have that ranking versus, all right, he's put in the work. We've seen an off season of what we wanted to see. He's put it together on the field. They still have 2 years left of high school. And by the time they're done, they're fatigued. And guess what? That same joy that they had as a sophomore or junior or senior, now they're just going through the motions. So Andrew said it. Who really does love it? Who wants to be out there? Who is trying to get better? We can figure out pretty quickly which of these guys is the most talented, which of these guys kind of fits in our box of what we're looking for with a prototypical frame and the arm, and who are the guys that we need to keep an eye on.
And just to add, Cooper, I think this time last year, one of the biggest in-person evaluations we had was when I went to see LJ McCray play. You're talking about a kid who had 3 sacks as a junior, didn't really see the effort at times on tape. And I know he was more of a tight end early on in his career. Show up to his spring game. They played West Orange and Trevor Jackson. And Trevor Jackson couldn't throw the football anywhere because LJ McCray had flipped the switch. And yeah, sure, you can see that in the highlight tape, but just kind of how he carried himself, what he looked like physically, like those are key ones. And we're not going to get them for everyone. Certainly. I mean, we cannot be all over the country scouting 16,000 players, but if the opportunity presents itself, when we're in a business where we're essentially trying to count cards and hedge our wagon, let's go with some guys that we believe in. And that eye test is certainly key.
I don't think you and I have had this discussion on air yet, but it's a good time to tie it in. Like our misses, if you want to call them that, and I'll go back to 2022, and Andrew wasn't a part of this, but like you look at some of the guys in recent history, you want to talk about a guy like Chris Marshall, who's on his 3rd program. He's at Boise State. Always believed in his ability. Smoke Bowie was another guy, team in Georgia that has won multiple national championships was hesitant to take him. Keontae Goodwin, right? Anthony Lucas now at USC. Wait and see. There's guys that we had at top of the board that if you were to ask me today how I felt 2 years ago about them, I tell you I still feel the same about their athletic ability. And Cortez Hankton talked about it yesterday, right? Every single one of those guys that he talked about, Malik Neighbors, competitiveness. He talked about Brian Thomas. Yeah, obviously a very physically gifted athlete, but he also talked about his multi-sport background, and he talked about his football intelligence. You talked about Ladd McConkey's work ethic. Those are all intangibles. Those are the things that accentuate and separate throughout the process over multiple years. And if you don't have those things, you end up in the bucket of Cormani McClain. And that's what he's got to figure out. Guys like Denver Harris. So, very simply put, if our misses are becoming between the ears, then it makes sense for us to put more of an emphasis on that when we are at these events, trying to figure out how these guys are wired. What's it going to be like for them when they go to the next level and they have opportunities? And that's the hardest part about this game, quite honestly. And you want to know the biggest difference between NFL scouting and collegiate scouting? It's the psychological evaluation and the money that the NFL invests and the money that is not invested for the majority of programs in the country at college football. That's the difference.
And they still miss.
Right? So, I mean, it's a crapshoot, end of the day. Final thoughts, boys. Drew, anything? Long show?
PGA pick, boys.
Cameron Young. Yeah. Sorry, I didn't say Scotty.
I mean, you're going to be in great shape to clip this if that guy wins it. I mean,
Cameron Young, book it.
I don't know, Drew. You sent in your pick this morning, and Rory's got a lot of stuff going on right now.
Got a lot going on right now.
But Rory's also one of those guys, like, he can channel anything into positive fuel, and he's coming off what? He just won Wells Fargo by like 4 strokes.
Rory's going to win this thing or miss the cut. I mean, it's one or the other with what he's got going on.
I'm trying to think of a guy that's been hanging around that hasn't won it yet. Man, Schauffele's right there. Can't get over the top. Jason Day's been wearing wild outfits, placing in the top 10. I don't know.
Who do you have, Ivins?
I just wanted to send that commercial. I took Brooks after he won Live Wherever at a high number, so I'm all on Brooks this weekend.
Brooks he's a good bet. He's a good bet. I like Brooks. I'll go with Rory though, and I'm not really a Rory guy, but I'll go with Rory. Just
we got Live Nashville coming up.
Live Nashville. Going to be a scene.
I had a reminder to put in a media credential request today that popped up this morning.
Oh yeah.
Just saying.
Excited to see my boy Rombo on Broadway.
June 21st to the 23rd. Let's make it happen.
Going to be a good week. All right, boys, let's get out of here. Almost an hour and a half show, guys. If you are one of those crazy football recruiting nerds that has been on from start to finish, you know who you are. We appreciate you. Make sure to like, subscribe, 24/7 Sports YouTube channel. For our DOS, Andrew Ivins, and for one of the best college football reporters around in Tom Loy, I'm Cooper Petagna. Have a great rest of your week, and we'll see you next Tuesday.